On the computer screen, you will see a square. It will be divided into two. There'll be a right half and a left half. We're going to flash some dots in this square just for half a second.
Your task, if you were a participant in the experiment, is just to tell me which side of the line has more dots. And it's usually pretty obvious which side. There's like a lot here and not very many here.
Now, there's one more thing. We're not going to pay you the same amount for the right and for the left. But regardless of the amount, your task is to basically be as accurate and truthful as possible. Ready? Go. The dot task is a basic experiment in conflicts of interest. Very, very few people start by lying egregiously. But if the dots are kind of similar, just slightly more to the left, they would say right.
Almost any moral conflict you can think of as there's a line and you have to decide whether you're going to cross it or not. You kind of want to go to the other side and you kind of know what the right side is. Maybe I'll go to the other side sometimes.
Health providers are now being held to a very high standard for productivity. Why is that? Well, we have a very expensive health care system. We need to pay the bills. We also have a lot of patients. And when you feel that pressure as a healthcare provider, it's easy to start to cut corners.
What's best for the patient gets a little bit influenced by what's easy, but by what's available, potentially by what I can charge for in my own office.
You go to a cardiologist, they actually get a $75 professional fee for reading that EKG. So some cardiologists, every patient that comes through the door, they get an EKG. If I am a surgeon or a dentist or anybody who does a procedure, I make more money if I do a procedure. Therefore, I have an intrinsic bias to want to do the procedure. I also have an intrinsic bias because it's my livelihood. I believe in what I do. And conflict of interest can creep up on you.
One of the things that we have to always be on guard with when we're making decisions is this decision being made for the benefit of our client or patient, or is this decision being made for our own benefit?
Do you choose a medication because you've been visited 3,000 times by a pharmaceutical rep who has told you that this particular drug is like the best thing in the real world, and they'll invite you to give talks and they'll invite you to dinners? And one of the things that I didn't know existed is that many of our pharmaceutical reps know exactly our prescribing practices. We have to be really careful about that as health providers because the bias that that can have in our decision-making is real.
I spent a little bit of time working for a pharmaceutical company. They had indicated an interest to have physicians come together, help guide some of the work they were doing, help create some tools that might be used by providers in the community. And so when I was in a different environment, I carried that same enthusiasm forward. And at a meeting we were having, one of my colleagues kind of nudged me gently and said, "You seem to be really positive about this specific drug." I found that I had this relatively unconscious bias that had been created by the relationship that I had with this company. And it wasn't even that I was being paid a tremendous amount of money. It was more that I was put in this milieu of interesting and exciting people in a nice place, and we were talking about things. You know, our expertise was being highlighted. It was this gentle, subconscious ego boost that made me feel more expert.
In the early 90s, several of the pharmaceutical companies were developing new oral antibiotics for children. I'm an infectious disease specialist. And several of the companies asked me to be a speaker for them. What I found was that the answers that I gave and the emphasis that I placed each talk, you sort of knew who was paying me to do it. I wasn't being as honest with the people to whom I was speaking, nor was I to myself.
I withdrew as a consultant to this company and felt that I wasn't able to manage that conflict in a way that I was comfortable with. So that's actually the only experience I have, because I've never done any work like that since.
I learned how it can be corrupting. It also influenced my own prescribing patterns because I tended to be more aware of those drugs.
Despite all of our efforts to manage potential conflicts of interest in terms of disclosure and being open about the relationships that we might have, it's only natural that some of those relationships might influence how we think.
My colleague and I studied conflicts of interest, and we found that toward the goal of trying to help people make more informed decisions, disclosure about conflicts of interest was pretty bad. And in some cases, it actually has a perverse effect of encouraging more untoward behavior on the part of the person disclosing the conflict. They tend to think of that as a buyer beware. Hey, you know my conflict now, and they'll just be as influenced as they want to be influenced because they feel like, hey, I've got a moral license to do it because I told you what my incentives are.
Healthcare leaders' decisions may be biased by those other outside influences and pressures in ways that probably are not in the best interests of patients or of healthcare delivery.
They think that they're not having a conflict when in point of fact, they probably really are. And they're pushing care in a way that they will benefit from and haven't really realized that that's happening.
It's important that our decisions for healthcare are evidence-based and that we try really, really hard to have unbiased information.
We want to make people better. That's what research should be about. That's what clinical care should be about. It's important for us to maintain the focus on the people for whom we're providing care. That's our business.